Hi, I'm John Schwab, and Jen and I are welcoming you to the maiden episode of our new feature, Saturday Matinee with Friends, talking with friends at home.
And today is part one of our 2-hour talk with our dear friend, director Mike Newell.
Pendleton and his pal Raleigh, Mike's dog, kept us on our toes.
We had a great time.
Yes, we did.
You're listening to Cinema Sounds and Secrets. Enjoy. And that's an order.
Welcome to Cinema Sounds and Secrets, Saturday Matinee with Friends. I'm Janet Doolin-Jones.
And I'm John Schwab, and today we're talking with the amazing master magician of movies, Mike Newell,
who directed the memorable, breathtaking, and beloved films Donnie Brasco, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, Dance with a Stranger, Pushing 10, and a little something called Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. And so, Mike, we want to thank you for joining us today. So, what do you say? Let's go to the movies?
Let's go to the movies,
Okay.
Janet.
Mike, thanks for letting us come over and have a chat.
You're very welcome.
I always find a biscotti at the beginning of a chat
Yes.
to be the best way.
Biscotti, tea and coffee, and dogs.
Yeah.
Dogs for company. Yes, Rowley, an extra dog visitor.
We have Rowley in the corner over there
Yes,
with
yes.
Allison.
Yes. So, Allison is our extra pair of hands today.
But Rowley doesn't speak.
No, Rowley
Well,
is...
actually, Rowley does speak.
Right.
Rowley speaks. No, it'll embarrass it. It'll embarrass me. Anyway, let's go on.
Rowley's a good, lovely boy, and Pendleton is here, of course. And so I just thought, just to give some of our fans of the show and friends a little detail, that you were born in St. Albans here in England, and your mom and dad were passionate amateur actors. And,
Certainly were.
yeah.
Yes. They started when they were in their late teens, and they came together as a group of friends, and not knowing what to do with themselves, they started to set up play readings in my father's family house. And gradually this little group of people grew until there were about 10 of them. And then one of them said, it's all very well sitting around on Sunday evenings reading stuff. Should we try actually doing something? Should we try putting one on?
Right.
A very scary thing to do, of course, but they were
Right.
they were very young, and they knew no fear, and they did. They put a play on, and it was a success. People came because there wasn't anything
Right.
like it. This is at
Right.
this stage. This is a town about 20 miles north of London. It was at that point a market town. It had two
Right.
big markets in the week, one on Wednesday and one on Saturday. It had a cattle market where the whole of the front of the centre of the town was
Right. Wow.
stopped, no traffic, and they put cattle and they they bought and sold the cattle. And so it was not, as it now is, a posh commuter suburb for London.
Yeah.
It was it was like a George Eliot town.
Right, yeah.
It was much more about itself and the characters who lived in it than it was in having any relationship with anywhere outside. If it didn't happen in the town,
It didn't
for
happen.
instance, when their productions got reviews, you could have put the reviews in the Times or the Daily Mail or whatever. They wouldn't have given a damn. If it was in the Heart's Advertiser, which was the local paper, which had all the kind of deaths and funerals and
And the what's on.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly right. That was a big deal. If you got a good review in the Hearts, it was always called the Heart's Ad. What do the Heart's Ads say? And they were completely potty about it, and that went on. They made a company. It had a name, and they then started to build theatres. They built 3 theatres in the end.
Gosh. That's incredible.
And so that was a constant in the children's lives.
Right. Right.
And so constant was it that sometimes they were altogether impassioned by what they were doing with the theatre stuff. They had jobs during the day, but they
Right.
didn't much.
Yeah.
They thought when I started to do it for money, to do it professionally, they thought I was completely crackers. They said, no, you mustn't do that. That's terrible. Look, you're going to waste all their education and this and that and the other. No, do what we do. Get a good job and then do it in the evenings.
Right.
And they were very dubious of me trying to do it as a living. And then finally, after I was working in Manchester,
Right.
they came up to see me do a show. They sat there for a day and a half while I ground through a TV show. And at the end of it, I said, well, there you are. What did you think? And they said, it was amazing. And I said, what was amazing? And they said, they always did what you told them to do. Now, in the amateur world, that does not hold good. No,
Right.
you dispute everything in the amateur world. And the thing that had impressed them was this sense of, a sort of iron sense of discipline. I found that very funny.
Amazing.
And did you start directing early in college or Cambridge or after Cambridge when you were?
No, I did it while I was with them.
Yeah.
The whole family was bound up
Yeah,
with their theatre activities.
that's great.
We lived in a house which was semi-detached. It was an old 19th century pub, which my grandfather, who was a sort of builder, had bought and split into two houses. And my grandfather's two unmarried daughters, unmarried because of the First War, I suppose, lived in one half of the house, and my father, his wife and three children lived in the other
Right.
side of the house. And so, therefore, when my mother forgot to feed us, which she did from time to time, all we had to do was to go and bang piteously on the door of the next door house, and the aunts would feed us. And that's how it worked, and it was fine.
I love it. And, I remember a story you told me once of being at Cambridge and going on an audition with Trevor Nunn,
Oh, yes.
which was one of my favorite stories.
I think we have to say Sir Trevor Nunn.
Oh, Sir Trevor Nunn.
Don't
yes,
we?
Our mutual friend, Sir Trevor
Well,
Nunn. Yes.
you may feel the need to do that. I do not.
Oh, I love that.
I mean, by this time, I'm an old man now, and so by this time, those people who are going to get knighthoods have got them, and so there's a good solid group of people who now are ennobled, and Trevor is distinguished and has a faultless commercial record. Faultless record in every way, for God's sake.
Yeah.
But you do not feel the need to call him Sir Trevor, nor do you feel the need to call Stephen Frears Sir Stephen, nor any of the others who've got degrees coming out of their ears.
Yes.
Titles.
Knighthoods coming out of their ears. So,
I love it, Mike.
But it's a great story.
Yeah.
so that story.
Yeah.
So
good.
when you go up, it's always called going up to one of those universities. You spend a week getting acquainted, knowing how the college, the conditions in which you're going to live, work, where the pubs are, where the student societies are, and all of those. It's a pre-term week, and during that pre-term week, you meet the man who is going to be nominally in charge of your morality. He's called your tutor. At Oxford, he's called something else, but in Cambridge, he's called your tutor.
Yeah.
And I went along to see mine, who gave me a microscopic glass of sherry and said in this funny fluting voice that I remember him having, and there's long silences because he was a mathematician and he was not fitted for human contact. And he said, what do you want to do here? And I said, well, gosh, of course, I want to work very hard and get a first and this and that. And he said, no. How do you want to fill your spare time? And I said, well, I thought perhaps I might toy with the notion of the amateur theatre amongst the... And he said, "Oh, Christ, Christ." Well, he said, "There is no hope for you. You'll get a 2-2, and I don't expect to see that. That's a very medium kind of a degree."
That's what I got, Mike. Be careful.
Okay, good. And I don't expect to see you until the last week of your last term. Good afternoon. And indeed, he got me banged to rights, and that's what happened.
Did you get a 2-2?
Yeah.
I'm in fantastic company.
There you go.
Well, I mean, what you can say about the 2-2 is that you're lazy. You're probably socially adept rather than unadept. And that you like looking out at the world rather than in at the page on the table.
Correct.
All of those things
Correct.
are true, and
Good.
that will probably add up to a 2-2.
Exactly.
And that's what happened to me.
So perfect. So that for our American listeners, we know what that is. It's still an honors degree, Mike.
Oh, yes.
We still graduated with honors.
Oh, yes. Oh, totally. Totally. Yes.
I won't let that go.
No. Nor should you. No. But the Americans have a completely different system, don't they? I mean, there is a cum laude and summa cum laude. Presumably, a first is summa cum laude.
Yeah.
Something like
I'm getting a nod from Allison over there, so I think that's right.
Right. Okay. So cum laude would be a 2-1.
Okay.
Okay.
And the kind of shit that you and I got. I don't know what you'd call that. So perhaps you try not to mention it.
Okay, so
on we go.
Back to the.
And so
you've
back
left
to your audition, but
Indeed.
you went to audition.
So there I was,
Yes.
and there I took the first tiny steps into getting acquainted with the undergraduate theatre at the university, and it was famous. There at that stage, this is 1960. There was no such thing as a film school anywhere in the land. There was almost no such thing as a theatre school. There were some acting schools. There was RADA and Lambda and that kind of thing, but and so everybody thought that what they needed to do was to be an actor. And besides which, I knew because I'd always done the big part in the school play. Okay. I was Antony in Julius Caesar, right, and stuff like that. Lots and lots of ghastly accidents, like trying to wear one's mother's jewelry and breaking it, and so a lot. You then, during your first few weeks in the university, you went along and you auditioned. Right. For the various societies, of which there were about 4 or 5, I suppose. You had to. They were very professional about it. You had to have a piece of Shakespeare and a modern piece. Yeah. And I can't remember what I suppose I took a bit of Hamlet. Oi. I can't remember what the modern piece was. Pinter, probably. The theatre is empty. The stage is cleared. And all that they are doing that day is to listen to the new young undergraduates do their audition pieces, at the end of which they will be either admitted to the society or not, and if any good at all, they will probably get cast as well. They will actually come away with a part. So the star director, and that always, the directors are always a year ahead because they are the senior men. And the main guy at the beginning of my time was Trevor Nunn. Right. And so there he was sitting sort of 3 rows back at the front of the stalls, and I started to crank out the Shakespeare, and then I suppose I must have finished that, and I started to crank out the modern piece. And at one point I looked up, and he was leant forward in his seat like this, and he had his hands over his eyes, and he was very gently shaking his head like this to indicate negative, right? And I sort of stopped because I was nonplussed. And he looked up and he said, "Thank you." and off I went, at which point I became an extremely well-known stagehand. And I was very happy being a stagehand. I was a good stagehand.
Right.
So that was me and Trevor Nunn.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Well, thank Trevor Nunn. Thank you, Trevor Nunn, for. I mean, I would have loved to have seen your Hamlet, Mike. But thank you, Trevor Nunn, for giving us Mike Newell, the director.
Well, of course, I wasn't going to be any good as an actor. Why? Good God! I mean, well, to start with, I weighed under 10 stone. I don't know how much that is in pounds, but it's very
thin. Less than 100.
Thin,
less than 140 pounds.
Okay. I was 6'3.5" tall. Oh my God. So this kind of pencil figure would come on. And all he had to do was to say, dinner is served, or whatever it might be. But of course, he was such a weird-looking thing that everybody expected him to be carrying a cartload of plot with him. Right. And all he got to do was to say, dinner is served. Well, you're not castable. There's nothing they can do with you. And so, of course, I wasn't going to make an actor. Of course I wasn't. But by that stage, I'd already started to get, because my dad was what the amateurs called a producer, which meant a director.
Yes.
So from a tiny kid, I'd been watching him do it. Amazing. And I'd been watching him with a sheet of a play and a set diagram on
stage,
the table next door to it. And he would work out the moves with a chess set.
Oh,
so
wow.
he had, I've got the chess set downstairs, I kept it.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
That was the first thing I stopped doing, because it's always such a bore doing the moves. And so from a tiny child, I'd been watching him do this stuff. Right. And then they used to, as a group of people, the company, call them the company, they were called the Company of 10, so the company. They would go off to weekend courses, and pretty much anybody could go. And I remember going at one stage, and they said, "Oh, go on, Mick, you do it." They called me Mick. And they gave me this little chunk of script, and I had to put it on. So they all expected me to do it in the rather fusty theatre that this weekend place had, which was probably some stately home somewhere that the county council had taken over. And I thought, no, I don't like it. It's boring. The theatre part of it's boring. We haven't designed it properly. The furniture's shit. And it's got a really good staircase. The house has got a really good staircase. And so I did my little piece with 2 actors on the staircase. And at the end of it, I thought, you know what, that was pretty interesting. I enjoyed doing that. And it was from that moment, from that particular weekend, when I suppose I was 16 or 17, something like that, that I began to nurse notions that maybe there was something other than being a stagehand.
Right. And so that you finished up at Cambridge, and then you went straight to Granada, didn't you, in their program? Yeah,
but you had to... What was happening at that stage, we were my generation was very fortunate.
It was a great program, wasn't
it? Who did we have? We had Richard Eyre, who ran the National Theatre. Yeah. We had Steve Frears, who is now Sir Stephen. And probably, in some senses, most important of all, we had a man called Michael Apted, who was the man who invented 7-Up.
Yeah.
And went back every 7 years to see how these then children, now adults, how their lives had changed.
I knew him from L.A. I knew Michael.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so there was that group of people who all came out of that university at that time, and it was always, as I say, there were no film schools, and there were no theatre schools for people like me. Right. There were actor schools, but nothing else. And so, what used to happen was that the television companies, because television was very was just growing
Yeah.
into. It had stopped being BBC One.
Yeah.
They didn't even have BBC Two yet, and the independent companies were just beginning, probably about 2 years old.
Right.
I went along to the BBC for a job on BBC Two, and
On
they
news,
interviewed me, and they were very kind. And they said, "Have you got any other jobs?" And I said, "Well, oddly, yes. I've been offered something at Granada, but of course I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to Manchester. And besides which, you're the BBC, so you're the big ones." And they said no. They said, "You might be wrong there. We advise you to take the Granada job."
Nice.
And I said, "Why? Why, you've been so sweet to me and helpful and all of that, and now you're saying, piss off. What's all this about?" They said, "Well, we're setting up a whole channel, and we expect to hire a great many people, and we expect to fire 50% of those people in the first year,
Wow.
because that's how it works.
Yeah.
Granada won't fire you.
Right.
You represent too big a commitment for them.
Right.
So go up and you should take that job. You'll get a better education."
Right.
So
that's
that's what I
trained.
did, and they were right. It's
Right.
exactly the right thing to do.
Right. And that's also where you met our friend Craig McNeil. And
Yes,
yeah,
but much later.
much later. Yeah.
The people that I met very first off was a very famous man in Granada whose name was Derek Granger, and Derek was a wonderful sort of free spirit, gay free spirit, and nobody cared.
Right.
It was a time when it was a very difficult thing to be gay.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 60s, it was rotten. But at Granada, nobody cared. And certainly Derek was blithe as a bird on a berry. He interviewed me in Cambridge just before I finished. And he was wearing a jacket of electric blue wild silk.
Oh my gosh.
Just gorgeous.
That's incredible.
The first thing he said, 4:30. "I'm terribly sorry, we've just run out of vodka." And I thought, I think this is probably the place
This is
to
my
go.
place for me. This is my place. This is it.
My God.
And it was true. It was like that, and they were a wonderful place to work.
Yeah.
You really got an education, and we knew nothing. I
Right.
knew nothing,
Right.
absolutely nothing.
I mean,
Cutaway, reverse,
Yeah.
to change the shot.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I don't understand a word of
Yeah.
what. And we got an education.
and how to
And within 4 months of going to that company, I was on the air.
right.
I was on the air with rubbish, but nonetheless, I
Right.
was on. I was doing the news in Welsh, but nonetheless, I was earning my living.
Right.
Yeah, cutting your teeth on this medium
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
to become what is now the art form of art
Yes,
forms.
it is indeed, and it's a. I think one of the things that you came away with was what you've just said, that it was the art form for its time, and indeed for now as well.
Yes.
And that it was infinitely improvable. It could be developed and shape-shifted,
Right.
and made better and more outrageous. It had an enormous range of connections to an audience, from the sort
Right.
of the country house drama right the way through to the early punk stuff.
Right. Documentaries.
And then there was the
plays,
documentary,
And the
they
plays.
taught us to do and the plays.
Yeah.
And the thing that we all wanted to do was we all wanted to be in the plays department.
Well, this is it. Sir
Now-
Tom Stoppard cutting his teeth doing plays
Well,
of the day.
And
That's it.
didn't you do some plays by like David Hare and Osborne?
Yes, all
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Yes, I mean, I bumped into, I did a couple of John Osborne plays. I did David Hare plays. I worked with Tom Stoppard. everybody wanted to get a finger in that pie.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you could do stuff that nobody else would do. It was still restrictive. You couldn't swear and you couldn't do this, that, and the other. But it was much freer in the head than the theatre was, and it was certainly streets ahead of the movies, which were very, very conservative and unadventurous at that stage. And indeed, in a way, you could say that Steve Frears, as far as the movies in England went, was the person who made the key breakthrough with My Beautiful Laundrette,
Right.
which was a movie.
Yeah.
I saw it as a TV show. He showed it to a group of friends, and I watched it, and it was quite clear that it was not a TV show, it was a movie. Lots and lots of things came out of that moment.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was by that time, this is probably about 1965, 66. We'd been in television for 3 or 4 years, and we got tired of being studio bound, having to be on sets and with huge cameras. And what we wanted was fresh air. And so the marvelous thing was that at that stage, of course, the Vietnam War was still in full swing. And one of the reasons that we didn't make films for television then was that there was no equipment to do it.
Oh, gosh.
The equipment was, I mean, a TV camera
Oh, yeah.
was the size of that fireplace.
Exactly.
Right, they were
It's massive.
huge.
It was just
Yeah,
like a
they were
small car.
Huge. Right.
There was very little you could do with it. And you used to watch all the great men coming up to do dramas, and they did hysterical things like saying, well, I can't get the shot, let's cut a hole in the set.
Right.
And they would.
Yeah.
And they'd get the shot, and there was a hole in the set. And I remember everybody started on Coronation Street. That was the start of the show.
Street,
And I remember saying to somebody, "Well, we can't get that shot in the public bar. Let's cut the bar in half." And the producer said, "You will not." He was outraged that I might actually cut the sacred sets.
So the equipment is what really kind of brought the
And
change,
so
right?
what made it possible to get outside was this French camera called the Éclair.
Oh, right.
And the Éclair was the one thing that it was supposed to be, and it definitively wasn't, was silent.
Yes.
It made a kind of clattering noise, and you just had to accept it. You had to say to the dubbing people, how much of that can you get rid of?
Yeah.
And they would do what they could. But the point is that one guy could pick it up.
Right.
And that was very exciting. And it was from that. And the Americans did it first, people like Pennebaker and all of those American documentary directors.
Right.
They got onto it first because it was American technology. Well, it wasn't actually, it was French. But
hey, listen, Americans will claim anything very quickly.
Slap a new name on it.
Yes.
Slap a new name on it, we're good.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you will, you bastards. But that made the Éclair made everything possible.
Right.
You really learned on in that company
Right.
was a magazine show. The magazine shows are very popular then. There was a thing the BBC used to do called Tonight,
Right.
which was a 30-minute slot at 7 o'clock or something like that. And they would do little 3.5 minute. They weren't news items. They were. It was literally a magazine.
Right.
Right.
Stories of the week, stories of the day.
And in other news.
Yeah. Of course, the only true professionals around at that stage, some of the technicians were, some of the camera people were, okay, not very good. In terms of the kind of the back office, the only pros were the journalists,
Right.
who were used to producing stories to a schedule, on time, and within a kind of a series of expectations that the audience would have. And so they used to send you out on a week's filming. It was you and the producer-presenter, who in my day was a guy called Mike Parkinson, who became very famous on television as
know his name, sure.
interviewer. And we piled into this tiny little car.
Crazy.
The technicians, the camera and the sound, went in separate vehicles. And you had a sheet of paper, which the news desk had given you, and it said, it gave you an address, a time, and then the kind of buzzword for the story. So call it the fishing dog, right? So you get to the address on time, and you knock on the door and you say, fishing dog? And he said, yes, come in. May we see him? Yes, there he is. So, where does he fish? He said, he won't fish today. We said, what? But we're here to film the fishing dog. You say he won't fish? No, he won't fish today. Why is that? Well, the wind's in the wrong place, you see. And how does that affect things? He said it makes ripples, so he can't see anything going on under the surface, so no, he won't. And so in those circumstances, you had wasted a morning, or you hadn't. You had to make it work. And so what we did was to send the researcher down to the town, to the fish market, buy 2 pounds of mackerel, and you'll spend the rest of the morning lobbing the mackerel into the river.
Oh, my God.
So that he will chase the mackerel like a stick and will then come out with a fish in his mouth. Like that. Didn't work. So you're constantly dealing with stuff like that.
Is that when Michael Parkinson went, this, I'm going to go interview people?
It must have been something like that. Yeah.
I'm going to sit in the studio and just talk.
Talk people.
And because it was journalists, all these guys were all journalists. The whole company, it ran on 2 things. It ran on drink and infidelity.
Oh, my Lord.
Those 2 things. And when the actors would come up from London, sometimes these shows would run for years at a time, the comedy shows, for instance.
Yeah.
And the actors began to develop a whole other life in Manchester. There was the London life and there was the Manchester life.
Right.
And sometimes the 2 collided, at which point what had to happen was that you had to choose between either London or Manchester, or mostly they chose Manchester because Manchester was kind of wild and free. And so how do you tell your family in London that you're not coming home this weekend?
Yeah.
Right.
How do you do that?
Right.
You invent a charity cricket team. Who have a match on Saturday afternoon and have another match on Sunday afternoon.
So
none of which existed, of course.
Right. Gosh.
But the handheld shot. So
yeah,
what we were talking about was that a great deal of production of the film that you actually exposed was done on cameras which were not like the Eclair, the French camera that we were talking about before. Right. They were, I can't remember, they had names, but they were newsreel cameras. So they were used to standing on a tripod.
Yeah.
Right.
And that would be very firm, and that meant the focuses and all of that kind of stuff. It was all absolutely fine, so long as you didn't move it.
Right.
As soon as you moved it, chaos
ensues.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember saying we were doing a story about somebody who was suspected of some sort of crime, not a serious crime, but and what we wanted to do was to get the look on his face as he opened his front door, and there was the very well-known local reporter with a microphone saying, "You did it now, deny it if you can."
Right.
So we had to get a shot where what we did was I wanted to do it in one shot because that was the good thing to do. You had to go from a wide shot of the little house, the terraced house, right? You then had to open the front gate. You had to go down the path, knock on the door. Guilty man opens the door and you do your stuff. Now, to do that, it took the interviewer carrying the microphone.
Yep.
Behind him came the sound recordist carrying the tape recorder. Behind him came the man carrying the 2 car batteries, which powered, at that stage, no tricksy batteries, car batteries, which powered the whatnot.
Oh, gosh.
Then came the camera, sort of shooting between the cracks and all the people, and another 2 car batteries to power
For the camera. Oh my God.
and then last of all, there was me. So you had 8 or 9 people going down the garden path.
Yeah.
Almost certainly spotted from the house. What are these blokes doing on the path here? What's
Yeah.
and that was how you made shots in
That's
those
insane.
days.
That is crazy.
Wild.
Oh, good Lord. And sometimes it worked. Then you got
Not much.
Not much. Well, I mean, so all of that led to finally, I mean, about 15 years really at Granada and in television and in Manchester and creating. At the point was the first big film was probably The Man in the Iron Mask, wasn't it? Yeah. I saw that and I loved it. I remember it. I do. It was
Well, good.
Yeah. It was 1977.
Boy, was that an education.
Yeah.
What was the big thing that you learned from that then, Mike? If it was an education, what was the one lesson you took away from it?
Well, I had 2 or 3 very difficult people to deal with.
Okay.
Right.
I was 34 and I had no track record, thus no authority.
Right.
Right.
And so what was I going to do? Well, there is no single thing that you can do except not to be frightened.
Right.
You should concentrate on not being frightened. And so I had to deal with a couple of the actors who were very, very tricky. I had to deal with the cameraman who was David Lean's cameraman.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
And
Right.
at that stage, I think he got 2 Oscars. He was going to get a 3rd. He was pretty tricky. And then there was the producer, who at one point phoned me up and said, "I'm standing in Lord Grade's office and you're a quarter of a day behind. What are you going to do?"
My.
I don't know, Norman. Perhaps I'll try to get back on schedule by the end of the day. Would that suit you? And this all came down in the end to the actor who was a drunk. He was a very fine actor and a drunk.
Yeah.
Right.
And he hated me because I was 34, because I didn't know anything, because he was very famous, he knew everything, and what was I doing telling him what to do? So he said, "You're behind again." And I said, "Yeah, I'm behind, Norman, and the reason I'm behind is that shit over there has taken it into his head to put me behind." It was a very hot summer, and he was wearing 17th century costume with lace and ruffles and linen and this and that.
Right.
And it took forever to get him ready for a shot. And I said, he's putting me behind. He would very much like me to go. He'd like to see me days behind,
Right.
Because it would be a bad thing for me. He said, I can't believe that. And I said, "Norman, there's a chair there. It's got your name on it.
Right.
Why don't you sit in the chair? Don't go to Paris today to buy antiques. Stay on the set, right? and watch what happens." And so he sat in his chair, and the actor came on doing his stuff, and he had to be ironed, steamed between every take, not between every shot, between every take.
Right.
Because it was so hot, and he was sweating because he drank a lot of vodka.
Right. Right.
And at the end of the morning, I said, "There you are, Norman. What should we do about that then, eh?" Because I'd stopped being frightened of Norman. He said, Yeah, I'll go and talk to him." I said, "Good plan." And off he tottered across the courtyard of this beautiful chateau that we was, and he went into the actor's caravan, right, which then acted like Disney. It went kind of
Yeah.
boom,
Yeah.
rocked and stuff like that, to do with what was going on inside. He came out after about 10 minutes, red in the face, and he came back to me, and I said, "Well, Norman, how was that?
Oh my God.
What did he say?" And he said, "I'm not coming out of this caravan until you fuck off, so I'm fucking off. You deal with him."
God.
So at which point he left the chair with his name on it, went back to Paris buying antiques.
I love it.
And that's how, that's a first film.
There you
You've got
are.
to-
Oh
you've got
my
to come-
God.
You've got to get through that.
Right.
But that makes listen.
But it was fun. I remember
Yeah.
every damn shot, and it was
Oh,
fun.
right.
Right.
I enjoyed it, and I think if I hadn't enjoyed it, I wouldn't have done it again.
Right.
I shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
I tried not to do it, and my agent, I said, I can't do this, Duncan. It's not a, it's kind of frothy junk, and it wasn't quite actually. It's a bit better than that, but anyway.
Right.
He said, no, of course you can't. And I mustn't ask you to do it. And I want you to know right here and now that I can continue getting you low budget, high artistic quotient television shows until the day you die. I said, I'll do it.
Well,
And of course,
Right.
he was
Thank
right.
God you didn't,
He was
though.
absolutely right.
Right. And some of it you shot on location, right? Or
Sorry?
did you go on location for that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a bit of studio.
Yeah.
There was a bit.
Right.
But mostly it was a location.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I do remember it because it was, it was a
Well, it was
wonderful.
a hoot.
It's a wonderful
And-
adaptation,
Yeah,
and it has a
yeah,
great
well,
ending.
was
Has
it?
a
I don't
great
know. I
ending.
mean, it was a wonderful adaptation by
Yeah.
the time we'd finished with it. But that was another thing that you learned, that a movie script is never finished.
Yes.
That's true. No, it's absolutely true. It's the one thing. It's never done
No,
ever. No,
not
because
ever.
even in editing, it changes and becomes something else. And then you went and directed the actor I grew up loving too was Charlton Heston in The Awakening.
There are certain shows
Yeah.
that one truly should forget. And the wonderful thing about that show was it was all set in Egypt.
Yeah.
We had to build a pharaoh's. It was all about the discovery of a pharaoh,
yeah.
right?
Right.
A new pharaoh. So I read all the books about the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb and all of that kind of stuff, which are immensely exciting. And they make a little hole. They know whether they discover a wall, and the wall is man-made, and they know that there is something behind it. And this really happened. They take a trowel and they make a little hole in the top left corner. There's a blast of stale air
Yeah.
comes out of the tomb because, of course, the body is rotted by that time. And they then put a candle through the hole. The hole's probably not much bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
They put a candle through the hole, and somebody says, "What do you see?" And the answer is, he just said 2 words. He said, "Wonderful things." I was so excited by that.
Right.
Because, of course, it was. I mean, we, at that moment, as he said those words, as he saw those things, we expanded the notion and range of human history by
Absolutely.
thousands of years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Every time there's a discovery.
And it was, boy, it was grand.
Yeah.
And so I had a very good time. I was immensely fond of Chuck Heston.
Yeah.
He was a very, very sweet man, and he was so generous to me. He knew I knew nothing. He knew everything, and he said to me at one point, he said, "There's one thing you can rely on me for, Mike. I always know where my key is. That means the light.
Yeah.
And I know where my mark is, because the focus puller has a very difficult job, and he needs that I get both of those things right." And I looked across at the focus puller, and the focus puller went.
But
I always remember him. But he was so sweet to me, and he sort of took me under his wing, and he showed me around Hollywood, and he introduced me to these famous people. He introduced me to William Wyler, not Billy Wilder.
right,
I met Billy
William
Wilder,
Wyler.
but William Wyler,
Oh, one of my
who had made
heroes.
Ben-Hur.
That's right.
right, one of my heroes.
and,
one of my director heroes. Yeah.
He had dinners where I would meet these people. I was, 34, 35 years old. Look at this rain.
It is not yet April. We're just.
It is not yet April. You're right.
And yet.
And he was adorable
Yeah.
to me. And I should have been much more generous. He wanted me to make another film for him, and I didn't want to do it. And I said no to him, and I didn't find the right way of saying no.
Right.
Anyway, on we go.
Yeah, he's a lovely man. But then you were.
I didn't care about the rifle
Yeah.
the NRA.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
all that.
No,
yeah.
he was
He was
a really
crazy
good man,
as a fox by that
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
anyway.
but he was a good person at heart. He
Yeah.
was a kind.
Yeah, he was. He
kind-hearted.
was generous.
But you then did. I mean, I didn't realize that your movie Bad Blood was a true story. The movie that you made about the New Zealand
Yep.
farmer, which
Yep.
was another big step for you. But then you made a movie that I saw when it came out, and I just sat there riveted. Was Dance with a Stranger,
Yeah.
which was the
Bad Blood,
Right.
the New Zealand show, was
Yeah.
very important because I said, by that time I'd made 2 films and everything had happened to me. You know, I'd had to deal with a drunk. I'd had to deal with a raging producer and so on and so forth. Along came The Awakening, and
Right, that
I did the famous trip of getting fired because the film wasn't good enough.
Right.
You bet. So Warner's fired me, and they were very sweet about firing me. They did it very, very well. There was a guy at Granada who was their the Granada's big cheese. Sir Dennis Foreman was his name. And I remember one thing that he said, which was the best advice ever. He said, you have to work very, very hard when you fire somebody. You've got to do the homework. You've got to take the punishment yourself. It's the most difficult thing you'll ever do is firing somebody. And it's true. It's very difficult. And those people on The Awakening
right.
were really sweet to me, and they got to do the work that they had hoped that I would be able to do for myself, but was sadly not able to do. They hired a guy. He made a movie called Two Lane Blacktop, which was a famous bad boy movie, and he was a film editor, which is why they put him on The Awakening.
Right.
He earned his living as a film editor, and once in a while he would manage to get a movie, and he would make something that was really, really worth watching.
Right.
And he was so nice to me. He said, come in, be here all the time, see everything that I'm doing. I will show you absolutely everything. If I need to ask you questions, I will. Why did you do that?
Right. Oh gosh,
and,
incredible.
Director Monty Hellman?
Monty Hellman.
Monty Hellman.
And he was, I was so taken with Monty. He was really nice. And so I came through that. I came through being fired and replaced and all of that kind of stuff. I kept the title. I kept the credit, remarkably. And at the end of it, I'd survived the damage. I'd survived the wounds. Right. And that was all because, the producer, who's a sweet man, as well, called Bob Solo, he was very kind to me. But Monty was like a father. He was a knockout.
He just walked you through it, and you learned a lot.
Yeah, right. But at the end of that, what I said was, I swear to myself, I will never make another film where I put the camera where I don't want it to be.
Right.
I will not do what they want me to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And I then went and I thought, and that's the end of me. There won't be any more after this. And somebody said, come out to New Zealand and make this film. And I went out and I acted on that principle. So I would do nothing except what I was convinced by.
Yeah.
And that's where I looked up the word artesian earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I began to realize that unless you drill down until you hit the big water underneath, you haven't got there.
Love that.
And you can't really operate. You haven't got the confidence or you're not ironclad until you've got down there and you can say to them, I don't care what you fucking say to me, I'm doing that, and I'm doing that because I'm down in the artesian well.
And I see what to do.
Yeah.
I see it. Yeah. That's wonderful. God.
And then I went on and I made Dance a Stranger, which was a success.
And that was your first time working with Miranda, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a piece of luck because I saw everybody, all the young. It was like Hugh Grant.
Yeah. Right.
I saw absolutely everybody, and they just didn't quite get there. And I'd seen so many actors, I didn't really know any longer what I was looking for even. Actually, I was on pure instinct. And she came along, Miranda came along, and she was working in a little weekly rep in Lancaster.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So she was a long way from the centre. But somebody said, a friend of mine who was a casting person said, you're in a jam, and I've heard that there is somebody interesting in Lancaster. And so we brought her down, and we were in an office in Soho, and she came through the door, and as she came into the room, a police car went past outside, going bee-ba, 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 bee-ba. That's the old Morecambe and Wise joke. He's not going to sell many ice creams going at that speed. And
good.
she said, trouble. I like a bit of trouble. And she went dancing across the room to look out of the window and see what was going on out there. And I thought, if you like a bit of trouble, and I bet you do, then you're the girl for me.
Amazing.
And so I cast her then and there.
Right.
And that was a good decision.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just an incredible.
And then there was Ian.
Yeah.
Ian Holm, whom I had a relationship with, and I was very fond of.
Yeah.
Right. A lovely actor. He was a lovely actor.
Yeah, he was.
Really
he was a
lovely.
terrific bloke. Anyway,
Yeah.
on we go.
I mean, but it was just like this. And it was kind of from there. It was suddenly.
It did very well at Cannes.
Yeah,
which didn't hurt it.
Yeah.
So then there was a bit of people said, "Well, what are you going to do
What
now?"
next? I mean, you had that was I think the Mike Newell Renaissance, wasn't it? Because once you had Cannes, because it was a huge hit in Cannes. It was a talk of the town.
Well, and the fact that it was a true story, as
Yes.
well, and quite a story.
Yes.
And in today's world, you'd be going, well, where's her lawyer who's defending her and who's looking out for her? And that would happen today.
Yes.
But it didn't.
I mean, the artesian part of that story was my mother. Because my mother she was very beautiful, and I think she's up there somewhere. I think she genuinely was.
Yeah.
She was a middle class, slightly lower middle class housewife with 3 children, a small house, my father with a job that he didn't much care about.
Yeah.
They were both of them crazy about the theatre, and she was a good actress, but I think her life was fenced round with desperation. And I used to come back sometimes from school. She had this sacred thing in her day, which was called my rest. I'm just having my rest, dear. How are you today, Mum? I just want to die, dear. She used to say that as an old woman. How are you today, Mum? I just want to die, dear. And I saw her one day, and she was asleep in an armchair, slumped over with her kind of...
Right.
She can't have been... If she was 40... She was barely 40. And I thought, there's no way out for her. And that then some years later, so 10, 15 years later, I thought, well, there you go. That's a place to start with Ruth Ellis.
Yes.
And so that's what I did.
Right. This personal choice of Mike's, connecting his mother's despair of her place in her life and Ruth Ellis's in hers, brought the power and emotion to Dance with a Stranger that made it an international sensation, and it changed the course of Mike's career.
And for our global listeners who did not go to university in the UK, we thought it would be helpful to clarify that a tutu is not a foofy ballerina costume with tulle skirts and toe shoes, but a type of university degree. I got one. I got a tutu, as we said. You can find more about the tutus at cam.ac.uk or the children's book, Love is a Tutu. Your choice.
Cinema Sounds and Secrets is a production of CSS Sounds. Original music by the composer and pianist Merv DePere. Sumptuous sound editing by Sam Boulier, graphic design by Paul Koulos, right-hand help from our super efficient production coordinator and webmaster, Isabel Roy, social media, Scarlett Moser, and our amazing team of production, intern, research, and writing assistants, Tara Lindenbaum, Dexter Blanchard, Jose Arroyo, Caitlin McAtee, and our devoted editor interns, Amy Hattori, Ashton Wang, Kevin Sanchez, Brittany Lopez, Moira Donnelly, Kate Isbova, Sophie Weiss, Avery Peterson, Charles Becker, Gabriel Morea, Jonah Fiden, and Kevin Theranay. And my gratitude to the most brilliant wingman ever, Batman definitely wishes John had his back, the excellent John Schwab, for his production support, love of film, and good humor. And my very special thanks to Pendleton, proving that dog is woman's best friend. And we'll find out much more about Mike and his journeys through his other masterpieces in part 2 of Saturday Matinee with Friends, Mike Newell at Home.
Indeed, we will hear much, much more because Mike Newell can talk, and it was wonderful.
No, it's really, really wonderful. We had such a great time, and you can find out more about Mike, his careers, these movies on our website, Cinema Sounds and Secrets, on the films in our talk with Mike today, along with recommendations on where to find films, on great books on cinema, special interviews with filmmakers, and more. And please send us your questions and thoughts at cinemasoundsandsecrets.com. You can find us on all of your favorite streaming services, including Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We hope you enjoyed today's show.
We'll see you here next time
At the movies.
Cinema Sounds and Secrets is produced in collaboration with Rankin Entertainment.